All right, so I have like 1,000 notes, so just let me get this ready. Very, very well prepared, you guys. And don't let me forget that's there. All right. Well, good morning. I'm so excited to be here and share with all of you this morning here in person and online. A big thank you to Pastor Bart for this opportunity. A little story about me is I'm a little old school in some areas. And what I mean about that is like I like a good hymn. I like a good shout out in a message. For instance, last week, Pastor Bart preached on Abraham and Sarah and the decision to go. And it was a family service, so I was sitting right back there, and I'm that guy that's like, yeah, amen, that's good, come on. So I encourage you to do that this morning. In fact, to make sure that you're all comfortable, we're gonna practice that this morning. So on the count of 3, we're gonna pretend that I just said something super captivating, all right? And I'm gonna, these 2 sections all the way to the back to say, that's good. I want right here in the middle for you guys to shout amen. And I want these 2 sections to say, come on. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Amen. That's awesome. Now we're all comfortable. And if no one else does it, at least later when my parents say, how do you feel like it went? I can say, good, a bunch of people shouted, amen. I was born and raised in church. Both my parents are pastors. That's probably where some of that comes from. And maybe you're like me. Maybe church is all that you've ever known, and that's awesome. Maybe you're just starting into this whole Jesus and church relationship and thing, and I want to encourage you, that is fantastic. Maybe you're 5 years in, 3 years in, or maybe this is your first or second time joining us, and we are so glad that you are here. If I had not had the chance to meet you yet, my name is Preston, and I would love a chance to connect with you and more members of this church. I'll be right around here afterwards, looking forward to meeting more people of the church. Well, we are ending my story. This is week 5. We've talked about making decisions to start, to stop, to stay, to go. And today we're going to talk about the decision to trust and to trust again, because that's not always so easy. Our big idea is still the decisions we make today determine the stories we tell tomorrow. Speaking of stories, I love the stories in the Bible. But when we talk about the stories, sometimes we can think that's all they are stories. And so today what I like to do is put this word life right in front. These are life stories. This is a book of history. The people really lived. The things they went through really happened. The places really exist. The church is taking a trip there this fall. My wife Morgan and I were able to go there just last year, past February, get on a boat on the Sea of Galilee where Jesus walked on water, to visit Jerusalem, and it was incredible. So I encourage you to be a part of that trip. There are life stories or accounts about all different things: princes, princesses, kings, giants, adventure, sword fights, assassination, death. Read the book of Judges, love, drama. From the beginning to the end, there are these life stories of people who put their whole faith or trust in God, and God is able to use them to save the day, to save their family, to save the nation, and to save a bunch of animals by building a giant boat. But they knew that God was worthy of their trust. And this morning, my hope is that I encourage you as well, that God is worthy of your trust. Psalms 84:12 says, Lord Almighty, blessed is the one who trusts in you. I like to do things called food for thought, something to chew on, something to think about this week, to encourage, to sum up this verse. Simply put, this is a must. In you, Lord, I put my trust. Well, this morning, I'm excited to share one of my favorite life stories from the Old Testament, the story of Joseph. When we meet Joseph, Joseph is born to a father who adores him and to 11 older brothers. That is so many older brothers. But these brothers are not Joseph's biggest fan. You see, Joseph is the firstborn son of Jacob's true love, Rachel. If you don't know the story, Jacob was like, yes, on Rachel, And then her dad was like, and tricked him into marrying her sister. Well, all right. And then finally marries Rachel, but Rachel can't have children, but her sister can. So there's some tension there, like, right? He has children with Leah, has children with her servant. Rachel wants children, so gives Jacob her servant, and then finally is able to have children and has Joseph. Joseph is the firstborn of Jacob's true love, Rachel. So I can imagine some sibling conversations would go, well, Dad just loves your mom more than our moms. That's why you don't have to work in the fields like we do. That's why you get a fancy coat of many colors and we don't, right? And so there's this tension there. The Bible tells us that Joseph was a dreamer and could understand dreams. And so he would share these dreams with his family, with his brothers. And 2 counts, the dreams say that he's going to hold authority over them one day. And there he is again, just kind of rubbing that in. I'm the favorite, Dad loves my mom more, and I'm going to hold authority over you one day. So his brothers were like, that is enough. We are done with this. So they create this plan, and they decide to kidnap Joseph. I know, it's the worst. The worst. Can you imagine? They get kidnapped, he gets kidnapped, and he's given to these slave traders, betrayed by his family, the people he is supposed to trust. They tell their father that Jacob was killed. Man, Joseph has already been through a lot. There's all this tension, so much so that his brothers have to, or not have to, but they decide to get rid of him. That's a decision that they made. Well, Joseph is then taken to Egypt, sold for a second time. And if you're doing the Bible reading plan with us, we just read the story of Joseph this past week. And I'm like, oh man, that's perfect timing. Go God on that one, right? Plan that out. So he gets sold to Potiphar's house, and Potiphar's this wealthy dude, and he finds favor with Potiphar. The Bible tells us, in fact, that the Lord was with him. And what happens is he works hard, he does his best, because Joseph knows whatever you do it for the Lord. And so he's working, he's getting more responsibility, and then he catches the eye of Potiphar's wife. The Bible actually talks about Joseph's good looks. And if it's in the Bible, then he was really good looking. Like so good looking that they made a record of it. So she looks at him and she makes an advance. Hey. And he's like, whoa, the master's been so good to me. How could I possibly do something to hurt him like this? So he flees from the situation. Well, that is not enough for her. She doesn't get told no. So she continues to make advances and he continues to say no. And then eventually she grabs him to try to force him, and he rips away, ripping his garment, and he flees from the situation. She's left with this garment. She screams, the guards come in, and she blames Joseph, says Joseph was the one that made the advances, and then he's thrown into prison, Pharaoh's dungeon. So let's stop right there. So many incredibly crazy, bad things have already happened to Joseph. So if anybody had the right to give up, to lose hope, to give into to despair, to say, you know what, God, if this is your plan for my life, I don't want it. If anyone was going to not trust God again, it would have been Joseph. But right there in the dungeon, the Bible tells us in Genesis 39 that the Lord was with him. Genesis 39, 21 to 23 says, the Lord was with him. He showed him kindness and granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. So the warden put Joseph in charge of all those held in prison, and he was made responsible for all that was done there. The warden paid no attention to anything under Joseph's care, because the Lord was with Joseph and gave him success in whatever he did. Joseph had a strong faith. He believed God had a plan for his life, and he never gave up hope. He always knew God would win in the end, and you can read all about him in the very first book of the Bible, Genesis. Joseph had to decide to keep trusting God, not just to trust God, but to trust God again and to keep trusting God after all these things were piling up on one another. The decisions we make today determine the stories we tell tomorrow. So let me share a story with you. It goes like this. There was a husband and there was a wife, and they are invited to the husband's employer's home for a nice weekend. He lives in a really nice house with a pellet stove, great backyard, nice cars, all these kinds of things, right? And the wife is a little nervous because she's not used to this lifestyle. But as the weekend goes, the boss shows that he's an awesome host, a very generous host. They never need or want for anything. He takes them to the finest restaurants in town, and the wife is enjoying being able to indulge. Well, one night they're headed to a very exclusive restaurant. The boss is walking ahead of them, so right? And they're just a little bit back. And the boss stops all of a sudden, just looks at the ground and is silent. The wife is thinking, what is happening? Are we supposed to stop too? Do we go ahead and go into the restaurant? What is he possibly looking at? Okay, it looks like that's a coin, maybe a dime, maybe a penny, some trash. And while she's having this whole internal conversation, the boss is still standing right here, silent. He picks up the coin off the ground, he smiles, and he puts it in his pocket. They proceed to go to dinner. They order appetizers, they're eating, they're having a great time. But the wife is still thinking about that moment. Like, out of all the people in the world who needs a penny, why did he grab that? And it starts kind of eating away at the back of her mind. And she finally thinks, I have to say something, right? Anybody have one of those moments? Like, I can't be quiet anymore. So she smoothly works into conversation. Well, my daughter used to collect rare coins. Is the coin you found pretty special? Smiling again, the man reaches into his pocket and pulls out the coin and says, I want you to read what this coin says. What? I know what a penny looks like. Okay, so she indulges and she says, well, it says United States of America. He said, yeah, but keep reading. Well, it also says 1 cent. Yeah, but that's not what I'm looking for. Keep reading. So she turns it around and she notices at the very top of this coin, it says, in God we trust. And he goes, yes. And she goes, and if I trust in God, the name of God is holy wherever it is written. Even on a coin that gets walked over, that gets lost, left in cars, bottom of purses, couch sofas. But whenever I see a coin like this, I decide to stop and check my heart, check my moment and say, God, am I trusting you? Yes, I am. And I take that coin and I cherish it for a small time. I think it's God's way of starting a conversation to remind me to trust in him. He goes on to say, luckily, God is patient and will keep starting that conversation with me because there are plenty of pennies. We must decide to trust God, continue to trust God, and trust God again. So let's get back to Joseph. Joseph had a gift from God to interpret dreams, right? It wasn't just the dreams he had that he shared with his brothers, like we talked about earlier. It was anybody's dream. They could share it with Joseph and he could tell you what it meant. So while in prison, he's in there with two guys, a baker and a cupbearer, both working for Pharaoh. And they have these dreams that are not settling well with them. And they say, hey, Joseph, right? They get to conversating and they learn. And Joseph is like, oh yeah, I can do this. And so the baker shares his dream and Joseph says, oof, yeah, you're gonna be free in 3 days, but you're also gonna die in 3 days. Your dream is not so great. But then the cupbearer's dream was almost the same thing. In 3 days, you'll be granted freedom, but you'll go back to working for Pharaoh and in Pharaoh's palace. And when you do this, please remember me. And the cupbearer's like, yeah, you got it. So sure enough, 3 days later, the baker is taken away and the cupbearer is returned to his status. And the Bible tells us that he forgot Joseph. So there's another moment where Joseph could have been like, well, I was forgotten, so you know what? I'm gonna forget my faith. I'm gonna give up. I don't wanna do this anymore. I've been working really hard. I've been trying to do my best, but I'm still here for nothing I did. Well, a little bit later, Pharaoh has a nightmare, and none of his wise men can tell him what it means. And the cupbearer is like, oh, I remember this dude in prison. But I can't just speak out of turn. So he has to build up this confidence. And he's like, Mr. Pharaoh, sir, yeah, speak, cupbearer. There's this dude in prison that told me everything my dream ever meant. So Pharaoh says to go get him. Joseph comes to him, and he receives the dream, and he gives all the glory to God right off the bat. No, this is not me. This is God through me. He tells them the dream, and he says, well, what's going to happen is we're going to have 7 awesome years. And then we're going to have 7 horrible years. We're going to have 7 years of harvest and plenty of food, 7 years of nothing. Nothing's going to grow. There's going to be a great famine. Well, the Bible tells us in Genesis 41, verses 39 to 40, after hearing this, Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has made all of this known to you, there is no one so discerning and wise as you. You shall be in charge of my palace, and all my people are to submit to your orders. Only with respect to the throne will I be greater than you. So Joseph planned for the famine, and people from all over came to Egypt for food and resources, including his long-lost brothers. Now, Joseph recognized them right away, but they did not recognize him because of his Egyptian wardrobe and his position of authority. Some things went down, and Joseph decided that he was going to test his brothers, to test if they really cared about one another. Hearing them talk about a younger brother, he's the younger brother that they got rid of. So he wanted proof that this new younger brother existed by the name of Benjamin. And so some other things went down, but Joseph was testing their character. And what's important to know about right here is one key to spiritual renewal is to work towards reconciliation with the important people in our lives. We need to trust God and ask for wisdom to do this and bring healing to both ourselves and the people close to us. Joseph didn't just jump instantly back into a relationship with his brothers. He took the time he needed to heal and do it in a wise way. Well, they passed the test, and in Genesis 45, he says, don't be angry with yourselves that you did this to me, for God did it. He sent me here ahead of you to preserve your lives. Yes, it was God who sent me here, not you. Genesis 45, 5 through 8. Joseph was able to see how God used their mistake to save thousands of lives, including their own. He forgave his brothers, and long story short, he said, hey, go get dad and everything you have and bring them back here, and we'll live together in the land of Egypt. And they did, and you can read all about this starting in Genesis 37. We must be like Joseph. We must trust God to work all things out for our good in his time. So another food for thought for you this morning to remember, chew on, write down. Joseph trusted God. It's true, and so can you. Here's the thing about Joseph. His story could have ended at any time. He could have given up being a slave. He could have given up after being tossed into jail. He could have given up on God. He could have ignored the pleas in prison to interpret dreams. If he would have given into despair, if he'd been bitter, if he had forgotten his faith, then Pharaoh would have never learned about Joseph. Egypt would have never been warned, and many people would have died. Keeping his trust in God made all the difference. Trusting God kept him hopeful in the dungeon. Joseph refused to let circumstances make him give up. He believed that God was with him. He believed that God was in control. Joseph trusted God, it's true. So can you. God used him to save the whole nation of Egypt, including his brothers that betrayed him. Back to Psalms 84. Lord Almighty, blessed is the one who trusts in you. This is a must. In you, Lord, I put my trust. You see, the decisions we make today do determine the stories we tell tomorrow. So let me share a story from my own personal life, and then we will look at what we can take away from Joseph. So I was called into ministry when I was 12 years old, and we can talk about that experience some other time and how God opened doors and put things into motion. But I got my first staff position when I was 19 in April of 2011. This April, I will be a kids pastor for 10 years. Yeah, it's the best job ever. And in those 10 years, God has done some incredible things, like the opportunity to go to Israel last year. I've become an ordained minister with the Assemblies of God, our fellowship, and that's the highest level of pastoralship that you can hold with the Assemblies. And I've been ordained since 2016. I went to Bible college, and I like to tell people that I'm a pastor first. My specialty is children. My college degree is in children and family ministry. I have an associate's in Bible, and I was at my first church for 4.5 years before God started working on my heart and transitioning me. So I sought some wise counsel. I've never been through a transition before other than like a job, but like not like Jesus, right? And so sought some wise counsel, and I wrote my letter to the pastor and to the board or the leadership team that helps make decisions for the church so that we would all be on the same page. And I will never forget this. Like it's been years, and I have forgiven and I have moved on, but I want to be true. I want to be real this morning. I remember what the hallway looked like. I remember the color of the carpet. I remember what the guy was wearing. So they had a head of the board or a chair of the leadership team. And after receiving the letter, he pulls me off to the side in a hallway and he says, "Got your letter. How can you do this? You are such a disappointment. You are letting everybody down. This is not God. You are not being Spirit-led. I'm letting you down after 4.5 years?" Like, that really hurt. Young 20, that really hurt. I gave more than 2 weeks notice, and not to talk bad about anybody, but to be real and raw, my last Sunday rolls around and the pastor takes a last-minute vacation. So he's not even there to say goodbye, to pray over me, or to bless me, and that really hurt. And because he brought in a guest speaker, I was not able to address the church family, the congregation. I wasn't able to say thank you for the years. I wasn't able to say goodbye. So I was simply at church one Sunday and wasn't there the next. And that really hurt. To the point, because I love people, to the point that I said, you know what? I just got hurt by people. I got hurt by people who serve the church. And God, if this is how people who serve the church and hold positions in the church are going to treat people who serve and hold positions in the church, I don't want it. I'm done. I want to just go sit on the back row, keep my head down, sing the songs, and leave. So I looked for other jobs. I love shoes, so I looked at shoe places so I could get discounts. Like, that didn't work, obviously. I enjoy the nighttime, so I was looking at for like 24-hour gas stations and 24-hour gyms and hotel night managers. And then I like people and I like talking to people. I am now a communicator for a living, and I don't mind being on the phone. I prefer texting, especially if it's a short conversation, but I don't mind being on the phone. So I made it to a second interview for customer service. And then they decided to go with somebody else. And then no one would answer my calls. No one would answer anything I sent. God was shutting all those doors. And I was pretty frustrated. And I don't know about you and God, but God and I, we have some really candid, real conversation. And I was like, what do you want? Like, do you want me to go back into ministry? Do you want me to work for a church again? Like, if you're gonna have to make that super clear, God, but I know you have a plan. God, I give up. I trust you. And as soon as I vocalized that, I got a phone call from my former youth pastor, who is now a senior pastor, inviting me to coffee. We went to coffee, and he let me know that his kids pastor was on the way out and was wondering if I could come and help them get through the holidays. Well, I had to take some time to think about that because I had to trust that God still had a call on my life. I had to now trust another pastor, and I was gonna have to trust a new board and leadership team. So I went to Florida on family vacation, right? And that's where I did all my soul searching. Came back and agreed and got hired middle of August of 2015. September, they said, hey, can you pull off a Christmas musical? And I said, sure. I don't know who can sing or who can memorize, but let's go for it. And we've had a musical ever since, and we started a summer musical program, but that's another fun fact about me. I love musicals, I love drama, theater, acting. And so I was there for 5 years before God started transitioning me again, and now us being married. The decision affects 2 people, not just myself. I can't just get up and go. So we start thinking about it, praying about it, talking to people, and we learn about Suncrest. And we got to be honest, Suncrest was like it's all the way in Washington. We're living in Texas. Let's see what happens, right? And we're talking with some other churches, and things are going pretty well. And then just like 5 years ago, God hushes everybody, closes the door. No one will email me back. No one will call me back except for Pastor Bart and Grant. They are the only one that will communicate, and that meant a lot. That stood out. And God took Suncrest to the very tippy top. And we got to come visit last August, and we fell in love with everything about Suncrest Family Worship Center and 9 Mile Falls. But we had to trust God, and we were having to trust another pastor and another board and leadership team, which if you guys are here this morning, you guys are awesome. And so we do everything, and we get everything ready, and we get the U-Haul, and then we get COVID. And so we have to postpone everything. And so we're trying to pack while having COVID. So we'd pack for like 20 minutes and then have to take like a 3-hour break because of the fatigue and the exhaustion. If you know, then you know, right? True blue, like day 14 quarantine is the day we loaded the U-Haul. And then we drove for 18 hours the next day. And while we were driving, Morgan's face explodes. Well, it just swells really, but it's like bigger than it was when we left. And she has to have an emergency root canal in Colorado Springs. And so then we had to be an extra day in Colorado Springs. And we're like, oh man, what else could happen? And then I got sick. And I felt car sick all the time, every day. In the car, out of the car, laying down, standing up. I felt just car sick all the time for 2 straight days. And we were like, okay, is God telling us to turn around? Like, did we miss this? Is something else at play, like trying not to get us to 9 Mile? And we're like, okay, if we could just get to Washington, right? And so we understood God's ultimate hand of protection has been on this because other things could have went down. But we made it to Spokane. Things are looking great. We get to the U-Haul. Pastor Bart and people from the church are there to help us unload, and we'll always be grateful for that. We're getting ready to return the U-Haul, and I put a dent in the U-Haul. Spokane. I put an U-Haul. There's this like pole. Anyways, I'm not bitter. I've moved on. But like I was so embarrassed that I told Pastor Bart, I can't go to church. Like this was Saturday night. I can't come to church on Sunday. That's too embarrassing. But we finally got in to 9 Mile Falls. And once getting here, everything has been incredible. We have loved every second of being here these last 4.5, 5 months. We love being a part of this church, and we love the opportunity to minister to your children. But none of that would have happened if we didn't trust God. None of that would have happened if we would have stopped trusting God halfway through the drive. Like, if we gave up on God in Wisconsin, that would not have been ideal. But here we are, right? So what can we learn from Joseph? 3 things this morning. Joseph accepted. So accept. Joseph didn't waste time complaining about his situation. He accepted being in the place God had him. Remember that God is aware of your new situation, and he wants to help you accept it and move on. Trust him. Number 2, do your best. Joseph did his best by helping the warden. As a prisoner, he didn't have to help out, but Joseph decided to do his best right where he was. Even if you can't fix your problem or change the situation, do what you can. By taking small steps, you begin to make progress. Trust God. Decide to do your best. Number 3, don't give up. Joseph did not give up his hope or his trust. He could have been discouraged, but Joseph continued to faithfully carry out his work. Don't be discouraged by the lack of progress. The only people who overcome difficult setbacks are the ones who don't give up their trust in God. This is a must. In you, Lord, I put my trust. So this week, when you're feeling down, overwhelmed, stuck in a dark dungeon, I want you to remember Joseph. When you want to give in to despair, when things aren't working out, I want you to remember Joseph. Remember that God is still in control. And if you can trust him, he can do great things. So let me ask you a couple questions this morning. Where do you need to trust again? Perhaps it's in a marriage. Maybe marriage isn't what you thought it was going to look at the way it's looking right now. Do you need to go to God and take some time and start healing and work towards some reconciliation like Joseph and his brothers? Maybe it's a different relationship or a friendship that you need to work on trusting again. Maybe it's a job. Maybe God is opening up a new position or a door for you to walk in, and it's a little scary, but you're like, okay, God, I trust that you have a plan for my life. I trust in this new opportunity. I'm gonna step through this door. Perhaps it's church. Perhaps sometime in your church experience, you were hurt by people in church, because we're all human and we make mistakes and we hurt each other. But maybe you need to start working on trusting God and trusting a church family and a church body again. As we move to close this morning, I'm going to invite the worship team back. And what we're going to do, instead of having an altar call, we're going to encourage you to make your chair your altar or wherever you are watching online. And we're going to give you a time this morning to just be with God, because I feel that there are people here who need to give all their trust to an incredible and sovereign God. I don't want you to let struggles and bad times take away your faith. I want you to be able to thank God in advance for his blessings. This is a must. In you, Lord, I put my trust. So what decision are you going to make this morning? Are you going to decide to trust God again in some avenue of your life? The decisions we make today determine the stories we tell tomorrow. So a couple worship prompts. Perhaps you're here this morning and you feel like giving up. You feel like you've been stuck in a dungeon. You're so stressed out and overwhelmed, confused, and you would like to change that. I want to invite you to worship with us this morning. We're gonna have everybody stand in just a second, so you won't be the only one standing. But I want you to really worship this morning. Throw your hands in the air and just worship. Number two, maybe you've been hesitant to give everything to God. And I'm talking all of your trust. Maybe you're trying to do things on your own and you realize that you need his strength, his help, his wisdom. You need to trust this incredible sovereign God that Joseph trusted and that we can trust too. I'm gonna ask everyone to go ahead and stand this morning, and if that was you, I want you to worship. I want you to throw your hands in the air and say, God, here I am. Give, that's a symbolic. You're giving your trust to God. Or perhaps you're just surrendering, right? Like, hey, freeze, I surrender, right? Maybe you just need to surrender something to God. Give him all your trust. And if you're watching online, wherever you are, your living room, your kitchen, your car, wherever, make that your altar this morning and join us in worship. Give all your trust to God.
is that's causing us to stumble, we surrender it all to you. Help us to trust again.